everyone. In this video, we will talk about console I/O. To understand console I/O, we will also need to understand the string class and the scanner class. The learning objective covered by input-output is use the Java system classes to do text-based input and output. And I also have some sub-objectives for scanner. A, construct a new scanner object for console input. B, write code that uses scanner next int method. C, trace code containing scanner next int method. D, write code to read user input from the console. And E, write code that uses the system.out.printf to output a formatted string. So we'll talk about the scanner class in more depth, and we will start by talking about strings though first. Let's look at the data types again. We have already talked about the data type int and double and float. And today I want to mention the char data type, which is a single character. It's basically just a letter. So this is still a primitive type that's available in Java, one of the base building blocks. A string, capital S, is a predefined class from the Java library. In contrast to char, which is a primitive, and these lowercase letters, we actually have a class and a string is an object, so you use a capital letter for that. If you are familiar with arrays, a string might look like an array of chars, but don't worry about that if you don't know what that is. But one difference is that strings are immutable. You cannot change them. We need to learn just enough about strings to be able to read from and write to the command window, and also read to and write to files, which we'll talk about later. So this is going to deal with how to parse strings and understand them. Here I have an example of hello world, which is your classic starter example, and I've broken it up so that it actually tells you that, for example, like H is at the index 0 when you start counting what position each of these letters are in. So if I set a new string, I can say string str is equal to hello world. And again, notice that I have a capital S here. And I can now print out this string. Instead of typing in hello world inside the system.out.println, I can actually just reference that variable that I've created. There are other things that you could do with string. So here's a string called other string, which I have hello, and then plus, comma, plus world. This plus does something a little bit different than what we're used to with addition. Actually, what it does is called string concatenation. So it actually combines the strings together into one big string. You can then print out that string as well. Other things that you can do, you can grab a char at a certain index. So here I have other string, which is hello world, and I want to get the char, the letter that's at the 4th index. Which one is that? Okay, good. You can see that O is at 4. And now I have system.out.println str, which is still hello world, dot substring 7 all the way to the length of string. So what do you think that's going to give me? What is at index 7 of hello world? Okay, good. So 7 appears at index 7, and then I want to go all the way to the length, meaning the whole to the end of the string. So system.out.println is going to give me the word world with the exclamation point at the end. Here I just have a list of string methods. It's just a few examples to show you what you can do with the string class. Check the Java library if you want to know more. Maybe the most important example on this slide is the length, which gives you the number of characters in the string. So even though when we start counting and indexing, we start at 0. Remember, hello world, H was at 0. World was at 7 because we started counting from 0. But the length of the string is as if you started counting from 1. So here I have an example. Let's say we have a student and her name is Olivia Scott. if you asked for the char at 0, that would give you the letter O, but the whole length, you count that out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, including the space, it's actually 12, even though the thing at T is at index 11. Learning objective 18 says, use the Java system classes to do text-based input and output. And it might be the case when you output the string that you have a certain kind of formatting that you want it to follow. So 18e says, write code that uses system.out.printf to output a formatted string. Oh, just as a side note, constants are variables that can never change. Final is added to a variable to stop you from changing it later. You can never update the value. So let's look at the surface area problem again, area calc, and let's just have it say the double length is 7.5, width is 2.3, height is 2 times pi, and I'm just going to take the area, the surface area, by multiplying each of the dimensions and in pairs, and then multiplying by 2 and adding everything together. Okay. When you print this out using system.out.println, it's going to give you an area that goes to 6 decimal places. And that's naturally what gets printed out with doubles, but maybe we don't want to display 6 decimal places. If you use printf, you can format the decimals using special formatting expressions. So I'm going to actually save a string called string line, and I'm going to say the area is %, 0.2f, and then have it create this \n is for a new line. And then I'm going to use system.out.printf line, comma, area, where area is the value that I got from double area, so it grabs that, and line is the string line. So now, if you use printf, you can format your strings in more powerful ways than you could with println, and it's often a little bit easier to use anyway than having to do system.out.print, keeping a space there, and then doing a system.out.println. Now you can do it kind of all together and save your variables, which is pretty good. Let's look at how system.out.printf works. Basically, in the first argument in the parentheses, you're going to have whatever string you want to have formatted in there, and then after that, you'll have parameters. So I can put in a string. I can then put any of these placeholders, %d, %f, %s, %c, which will format the string in certain ways, depending on the parameters, which are also saved as variables. So I put this here as just a reference for you to remember what these format strings will look like, because it might take a couple of iterations and practice with writing code with these different placeholders to get used to what they actually give as output. Great. So now let's talk about input. We use input from a user to do something with the program. So the program actually interacts with you. The scanner object is the thing that uses input. And again, like string, we have a capital S for scanner. So these are also objects that have certain methods associated to them. Now, scanner does require some syntax, which you may not be familiar with yet. That's okay. But similar to string and similar to how you do variables, you're going to have a variable named scanner, and in this case I'll call it input. I'm going to say new scanner, and system.in is the thing that corresponds to system.out. That's what lets it know that from the terminal, that's where you're going to be typing in. Now, to be able to use scanner in the first place, you need to have this import statement, import java.util.scanner. We didn't need to do that from string, but for scanner, to be able to use scanner, we need to grab all of the methods that are associated to it, which are available in a library. So now that you have this input that's basically waiting for you, you have a stream. And now what I have here is the program is asking you to enter a number. And I will have it ask you for this number, and you're going to input some integer. So I have int user input is equal to input, that's the scanner object, dot next int. Great, so you've been prompted and you are then going to type in this number, 7. It's going to store that input, and when you hit enter, it's just going to print out that you had that number 7. Another thing that you can do is string name input.next line, so it takes the whole line that you are typing, and then it has system.out.println hello plus your name. So maybe some things to point out here. I could have also formatted the strings maybe with the printf instead, but I think in this case it's better to use println. And the other thing I want to point out is that in the first case you have user input that's saved as an int, and it takes next int to know that, whereas for string name it takes the whole line and doesn't apply any sort of other data type to it. The other thing to notice is that input is used throughout, so even though I had scanner input and then I used it with user input for the int, I can reuse that same string and use the store variable. Just to go over this in general, now that we have an example, the scanner class has methods for reading user input values while the program is running. It's in the java.util package. So we saw that with our line import java.util.scanner. Related classes are always grouped into these kinds of packages together. For now, we'll just use that syntax. I know that not everything has been presented yet. The one package that's always available is called java.lang. So string actually comes from java.lang, which means you don't need to use the import statement to do it, but to use classes in other packages, you have to do the import declaration before starting anything else. Let's look again at how we do a scanner object. You create a scanner, so capital S, scanner, whatever you want to name it. I called it console here, is equal to new, there's this keyword new, scanner system.in. So console is a variable and it can have any variable name. Scanner is what's called a constructor that sets up the object. System.in is an object in the system class which refers to the standard input stream, which is the keyboard. So this is why you're typing in. You could also get input from files, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll talk about that more later on. At this point, I think we have enough information to be able to do a little bit of practice. So I will show you some example code. Right, so I have this import java.util.scanner, public class darts, and then I have scanner console, and I've blacked that out. So what should it say here if it wants to take input from the keyboard? Good, so it should say new scanner system.in, and this particular code is just asking you how many darts you would like to throw at a target. So I'm going to have it save darts as an int. If I want to save your input as this int, what do I write here? Good, so I'm going to write console.nextInt so that it knows that it's going to take an int. And here I have system.out.println. I threw, and I used just string concatenation plus darts, which is the variable, and it'll tell you I threw 7 darts. One thing maybe to point out here, again, something to do at home, is do system.out.printf, same code, and have it print out that same line. To wrap things up, I have the learning objective. Again, use the Java system classes to do text-based input and output. The sub-objectives here talk about using the scanner object for next int and getting input from the keyboard. So that's something to keep in mind, how a scanner is used, and you can of course look this up in the library. I think maybe one thing to take away that differs scanner from string is that you have to use this new keyword. So that's something to watch out for, and you have to do this import statement. And then finally, learning subobjective 18E is write code that uses system.out.printf to output a formatted string. We showed some examples with printf. I went back and I showed some examples with print and println. So you should be able to do either of those things and format your strings the way you want to. So do take some time to practice and see what the difference is between using system.out.printf versus system.out.print or println.